So what we're going to look at now in this particular lesson is only going to apply to you if you're following my recommendation to download and install VS Code, because VS Code needs some extensions for us to make use of it for what we're doing on this course. And what I'm going to do is just run through how I've set up VS Code and point out the extensions I've installed, and these are the ones I would recommend you also install so that your experience is the same as mine when we're coding along. But there's a few which are essential to install, which I'll also point out. So, presuming that you have Visual Studio Code installed, I'm just in my demo folder, which is an empty directory. And the first thing I'm going to do is open up Visual Studio Code. Now, if you're on a Mac, this might not work for you. And if it doesn't, you'll need to open up Visual Studio Code normally, and then I'll show you how you can get this functionality. But I'm just going to type in code followed by a period, and then this will open up Visual Studio Code in the folder that I'm currently in, which, like I say, is just an empty directory. Now, if you was not able to open VS Code just by typing in code followed by a period in the terminal window, then what we need to do is add the code into your path on your machine. And this applies to Mac users and Windows users as well. Although on Windows, it will typically install code into your path automatically. But either way, there will be times on this course where we need to show all commands to do something inside VS Code. And on a Mac at least, this is available by using Shift Command and P. So I'm just going to do this, type in Shift Command P, and this brings up the command palette, and it will give us a list of things that we can do and commands inside VS Code. And what we want to look for here is path. And in order to get the functionality that I just demonstrated, you'll need to use shell command, install code command in path, and just click on this. And then this will successfully install it in your path. And you should find then that when you quit VS Code, you'll be able to open up code just inside the folder that you're in, and then it'll open up Visual Studio Code with this folder opened. So if you've never used Visual Studio Code before, I'll just go through a couple of features. We've got our Explorer window on the left-hand side on this particular tab. We can search. We've got a source control tab. We've got a debugging tab. And this fifth one is for the extensions that are available in the VS Code marketplace. Now, I'm just going to run through the different extensions I've got installed, and these are the ones that I'd recommend you also install. And what you want to do is just search for them in the marketplace, just by their name. So if you wanted to get the auto close tag extension, then obviously you just type in auto close and you'll get the extension listed from the marketplace, and then you can use the install button to go ahead and install it into your version of VS Code. It might be called a marketplace, but all of the extensions are freely available, they're all open source, and you can just add them into VS Code without any payment whatsoever. So just by way of extensions that I have installed, I'm just going to run through them and give a very brief explanation of why I think they're useful for developing this particular application. So auto close tag, we're going to be writing code that looks very similar to HTML, and that means we have opening and closing tags, and this one will simply automatically add the closing tag to our opening tag, the same as it does in Visual Studio, the full version. So it's just a time saver. The same goes for the auto rename tag, and as this little screen capture shows you, as you type into the opening tag or closing tag, it'll automatically rename the other tag as well. So both of those little time savers can be quite useful. The bracket pair colorizer is incredibly useful, and what this will do is allow you to see visually the closing bracket to an opening bracket in a different color, or as the same color I should say. And as we write our code and we deal with nested brackets inside brackets inside brackets, then it's incredibly useful to be able to visually see where the opening bracket is, and this helps us do that. The C# extension and C# for Visual Studio Code powered by OmniSharp this one is. This one is essential for C# development. And what this gives us is C# editing support, including syntax highlighting, IntelliSense, go to definition, find all references, and debugging support for .NET Core as well. All of the things you would expect to find inside Visual Studio the full version, this particular extension gives us inside VS Code for C#. So this one is not optional, and you have to install this one to develop with VS Code and C#. Another one I have installed is, again, it's just a time saver. It's called C# Extensions. It just kind of gives us a small improvement on our development workflow. And what this one allows us to do is just right-click inside our Solution Explorer and create a new C# class or a new C# interface. And it gives us small templates when we use this, so we don't write out quite so much boilerplates when we're creating a new class or interface inside VS Code. So just quite useful to have, but it's not essential. Another one that I have installed is some snippets for React, and it's called ES7 React Redux GraphQL React-Native Snippets. It just allows us to create our React components very quickly and very easily by using these. And I'd also highly recommend that you install this particular one as well. Also, I have a Material Icon theme installed, and this offers no functionality, but it just makes our icons for our files inside Solution Explorer have a pretty little icon that's related to the type of file extension that they have. And it just allows us to visually see what type of file is based on its extension. I also have NuGet Package Manager installed. If you were using Visual Studio the full version, you would have access to NuGet Package Manager. And NuGet packages are what we add to our .NET project to add some kind of functionality. Now, the .NET framework is pretty big anyway, but it's not going to solve all of our coding problems, and there are occasions where we do need to add third-party packages into our solution, and the quickest and easiest way to do that is, I find, to use this particular extension, this NuGet Package Manager. I also have installed this Prettier code formatter, and this allows us to format our JavaScript, TypeScript, and CSS code using this particular extension, and it just makes it easy to reformat our code. Nothing more than that. And the last one I have installed is one called SQLite, and for development we are using the SQLite database just for development because it's super quick, super easy to get started with. And this particular extension allows us to take a look inside our database to see what's happening inside there. So those are the extensions I have installed. And if you're using VS Code, I would highly recommend you install the same ones as me. So now we've got our development environment all set up. The next thing we're going to do is start building our application.